this is the second session on this picture. I've actually, in between, since yesterday, I've done a slight softening of the sky with obviously fresh paint on top of paint that in fact has dried totally during the night because of the alkyd white. So I've just softened a little of the blue and I've developed some of the white. Now, before I get on to the sea, I must just explain actually what I'm going to do. As you know, the scene is based on this little study. So that's the sea. But I'm also going to incorporate some of what's on these two studies, where the waves are a bit stronger and beefier, because there's no particular waves in this sea. So I'm going to combine the two things, particularly this part here, if I can. So I'll put those to one side. I have just mixed my colour, and the colours involved are ultramarine again, viridian, which is really a kind of phthalo green, but let's call it viridian, and some violet, some cobalt violet. But at the moment it's mostly ultramarine and viridian, which gives a kind of a turquoise colour. A little bit strong. Put a bit of white, because it's all mixed with white anyway. So I put a little bit more white. Still pretty strong. You probably notice I'm using a smaller brush now. I'm going along the horizon and I'm leaving a white space above it because I know that the light and the white waves come up against the headland. So far this is going to follow this study here. I'm leaving this bit blank because there's going to be a lot of sparkly water in there, I hope. All being well. I'm going right across. I'm going to put in a little bit of cobalt violet as I move away to the right, and it seems to work in the study, so it'll work on this. It's always a nice colour. Yummy. Now, as I come up here, I'm not going to leave any white space. This sea will be dark against the sky. In other words, the horizon will be dark. Well, dark by comparison with the sky. Oops. I'm painting this, as I said, on a Winsor & Newton canvas panel with extra priming on it, which put on quite roughly. The canvas texture means that the paint doesn't flow quite as well as if I'd done it on just an ordinary panel. Put that down. So I've already established now the horizon. I've left space for my light here. Now I've got to think about my foreground waves. This is the one that's mostly in the foreground, and I've done this to indicate the sort of convex nature of it. Some of the waves will be, I'm not putting in many waves, but some of the waves will be concave. Those are the waves that are forming. Convex is the ones that are breaking. I'm going to use a little bit of my olive green. We will have to have a little mention of the colours again once this is underway. This is a convex wave, a concave wave, sorry. I'm glancing down at these studies here. Not following them exactly, but just getting the idea from them. Perhaps another one here. And on this picture, there is much more of a slope down of the waves as they come in. In other words, the shoreline is not horizontal as it tends to be in that and in the others, but I've given some perspective to it, which it often has. It doesn't happen not to have it in these studies, but when I'm down there on the beach, it's often like that. So that's what I'm doing. Now, I'll keep going with my basic sea colour here. You can never really tell which colours are correct. That's to say, when you have got the correct colour, until you've got all the other colours in. For instance, this turquoise is probably too strong. I'll soon find out. Whereas this is probably more... This is probably nearer the real colour. Right up to the figures. In fact, I can go right over the figures because I know that the figures won't rub out when I rub the paint away. So they're a real working drawing. You notice that I'm actually using the paint a little bit thinner than I did yesterday. Almost like rubbing on pastel. So as the waves go back, and I'm not going to put that many in, but as they go back they become more horizontal like the horizon. As they come forward, they're going to become more slopey. So now I think I'm going to strengthen this wave here with a little bit more cobalt violet mixture, obviously not pure, just to give the feel of that wave there. I hope eventually that I'll be able to have a little bit of spray here, because I often get that in my drawings. I haven't got it on my oil studies, but I have got it on some of my sketches, where the wave breaks against the rocks and creates a very nice spray effect. Okay, that's enough with that wave. I'm adding some shadows to my foreground wave, getting it ready to receive the light colours. By the way, the brush I'm using now is a synthetic hair graduate brush, quite small. They're very hardy brushes, relatively cheap and very, very useful. Now, I think I'm going to go straight in with the light here, the light that creeps in from the left on the sea. Take white. I'm going to see if I can put it on with a palette knife. Don't always use a palette knife, but sometimes it can be good. I've mixed it with the permanent rose, the white mixed with the rose. Everyone knows. Let's see what happens. Need a bit of a steady hand. Palette knife works well on a canvas rather than on a plain board. So where you've got light, you must also have some dark showing through, because the light sparkle only works if you've got the dark bits in between. I hope this is going to make sense. And here comes the light. But I think I'm going to add a bit more dark now. Probably down here. The paint is already beginning to dry, believe it or not. Getting tacky, which doesn't matter at all. It can be a help. Always remember that you need to know the state of dryness of the paint on your canvas. Is it completely wet? Is it running? Is it drying? Is it tacky? Or is it dry? All different states of dryness. Sometimes I use a palette knife, and then the palette knife strokes, I then use a brush on or with, because I don't always like thick palette knife. The palette knife can apply the paint very thinly if it has to. It's quite a precise tool. I've got some little figures in here, but I'm going to ignore them for the minute. There's a little hint of a splash here. The lightest whites are the ones representing the sun reflected on the sea. The white waves are not as white as you think. Going to do that in a minute. Right, we're beginning to get there. Next thing to do, to think about, is the foreground wave, which is this one. This is the one that will finally end up as sand down here. So this is the edge of the sea. So we need to work our way forwards. So I'm going to move down now towards the foreground wave. Still the turquoise type of water coming down, and on this side this canvas with its priming is in fact quite rough, so it's harder to make the mark. Have to persevere a bit more. Now, back to my darker waves within that. Another one coming here. I need to use some of the white spirit to make the paint a little bit more fluid. I'm reaching my wave. Not far now. This, by the way, is a sandcastle, or it's a pile of sand. Not quite a sandcastle. It's a pile of sand with a spade sticking out the top. Now, I'm going to refer a little bit to these two studies here. These will help me, I hope, to see rather rougher waves. This one, I think I need to increase the size of that wave on this picture. I better do that now. With painting the sea, there is a basic colour of the sea, which may be grey, or it may be blue, or it may be turquoise, or whatever. And in this picture, this is the kind of basic colour of the sea. And once you've established that, you can then work in your lights and your darks. Quite simple in a way, in principle. Okay. Now these waves, I'm not going to use a palette knife for the moment, if at all. Now I've already said that the white of white waves, in fact, is not white. It's sort of off-white. If you do it white, it doesn't look quite white. You can add white to it afterwards. What's this? I don't know. So these waves, because they're breaking, are convex. So my strokes follow a sort of a convex . Now I need to put in some darks. Still following the round convex pattern, because it helps me to remember the perspective of the wave. Take a palette knife. If I were outside painting this in front of the scene, plein air, as they say, I would probably adopt much the same method. But of course, the sea moves very quickly, the tide moves quickly. And on these studies I've got written tide coming in fast, 3:30 to 4:15. So I didn't have that long to paint them. And then you've got to run for it. Now in a little while I want to go back to this area here because it's a little bit overdone, not very subtle. But I better keep going on this for the moment. My aim also in painting beaches is to see how the cold colour of the sea the cold colour of the sea goes into the warm colour of the sand, how they gradually mingle. So that will happen round about here. All being well. Making waves. That's what he's all about. Making waves. Now, this is a little bit crude. And I want to get the way the sea spray goes upwards into this headland, Trevose Head, and to an extent I wouldn't mind getting the same thing here, but we'll see. Similarly along here. The idea is to try and create atmosphere, the feeling of the beach and the sea, the smell, the sounds. And everything. Now, as I go leftwards, I'll try this again. See, this paint obviously is wet, but that paint is dry. So I'm scumbling mist over the top. Is it working? I don't know. Difficult to tell until I get this dark headland in here. Then it should all come together. Don't want anything sharp here. Defined but not sharp. No, I've still got to get on with the sea here, because this is my concave wave. Always more difficult to do, because in a concave wave you have the patterns of the flat sea that are sucked upwards into it. Always good to see on photographs or when they're well done on paintings. So I'll see if I can do it. Okay, so I'm going to imagine the foam coming backwards. When I say foam, I don't mean spray foam, I mean lacy foam that you get on the sea. Going to go backwards, and just a bit of it's going to be sucked up into this wave, which is turning over, just ready to turn over. Hope it works. Let's try. This is quite light, but when it gets inside that wave, it's no longer light. It's obviously lighter than the wave, usually, but just looking down at my sketch there, I got it pretty well actually when I did it on the beach. Not always possible to repeat these things. I hope you can see that all right. I'm not going to overdo it, because I've seen loads of pictures where it gets pretty well overdone. It's a very nice effect. Darker here. I'm not explaining which colours I'm using because I'm afraid that takes away from concentration a bit. So the perspective of this wave is that, curling over. The perspective of where it goes back is that, an upward slant. Then the perspective of this, if you need it, which you don't really, is the other way around, is the opposite to the convex one. Some bits may actually be breaking already, so I'll put some in. Just the hint. It takes quite a lot of observation to understand how waves go. Sometimes just sitting on a beach and watching is instructive, but if you can take a little sketchbook and do diagrams to try and understand it, that can be very helpful. Not necessarily drawings, but diagrams. I have done many. Because waves do obviously repeat themselves. The only decent thing they do is repeat themselves. Yeah, the only decent thing they do is to repeat themselves, so it does give you a chance at least of capturing something. I'm trying to get some dark spaces between the lights. It's important. The lights won't show up unless they've got darks to contrast with. That dark's quite good there. I'll do a bit more of that. That's an accidental one. Now, where are we? This is empty here. By the time the wave gets here, it's actually quite a bit bigger because it's nearer to us than, for instance, there. One of the most important things in waves is shape. Can you get a shape you need a shape that's a little bit irregular, nothing too predictable. Because waves can be pretty predictable. They keep doing the same thing all the time. But every now and then one comes along which has got a great big bump in it or a great big hollow in it. And those are the ones that are interesting to paint. Or make up, which is what I'm doing.